Don't want to lead you into or have you in a false sense of security. Have we got your attention now? Hope so. Sorry about the noise. I just thought of a bit of a topic. I'm getting a lot of people inquiring, which is kind of good. If I finish what I'm saying, high kilometre vehicles, like there's a lot of people buying parts, which is cool. Okay, so basically all these, up until the last couple of decades, I suppose, you know, these vehicles, people, you know, you'd start to see problems with them even, you know, not Toyotas, you know, in general, you know, let's say before the millennium, in the back in the, 1980s, 1990s, do you remember what garbage some cars were, you know, and they used to, you'd have problems at 20,000, 40,000, 60,000, by 80,000 Ks, people would be saying, you know, it's getting a bit long in the tooth, it's getting a bit long in the tooth sort of thing. Now we've got people with these Toyota, and they're awesome cars, I can see why, and they hold their values so well, so I see why you've got to do it, but don't be in a false sense of security owning a 300,000, 400,000 kilometre vehicle thinking you're going to get away with 100% reliability and not having any issues. Now, we can show you all the common things we see, okay, and that's what we do and we're going to do, and we're going to get better at that. But I just wanted to say it's really good. I mean, a lot of all these injectors here, for once, I want to say for once, in the last few months we've been absolutely smashed with injectors, right? So the good news is though, instead of what was happening, there was a bit of a pattern for a while that, in my opinion, people were replacing injectors prematurely, kind of like, you know, a lot of people with 2014 and 15s, and I mentioned it in other videos, that have only done, it's a lot of times contamination people worked on and bent the fuel pipes, the contamination thing and all of that. So the same way, we don't want to have to replace injectors at 80 and 100 and 120 and really 150. They shouldn't, look, sometimes they need to be done from about 150, even the full DLCs. It all depends a little bit how the vehicles are used, I think, but we don't see that many of that vintage, so it's hard to tell you at the moment exactly why and what the patterns there are, but generally the full DLC injectors are lasting around the 200,000 mark pretty well, okay, which is why the seats are the thing that you probably should replace, you know. Look, the seats are going to last around about as long as the injectors. That's what I've tried to put out there. The best average recommendation between all the vehicles is the 7-year 170, but quite often with the full DLCs, if you're doing higher Ks, you're going to be able to push them to 200 and beyond. And we've demonstrated a few cases where you can get even more Ks without having problems with the seats leaking and major injector issues. Like, you know, you can see, let's have a look at a couple here. That one, so that's one that obviously had blow-by. This is just a whole bunch that, you know, these are just kind of like a bunch that are in a box that, you know, whatever, that have come back, and, you know, so these are the sorts of things that can happen. You want to get them out while they're clean like that, right? That's all pretty normal and everything. Now, let's not, don't be, you know, it leads me back, it always reminds me of this guy I speak to. He's in Longreach, he's got a workshop there, and obviously a lot of people, they're heading out with their vehicles and caravans out on their trip, and that's where a lot of them have problems. And quite often, all the younger, you know, lower K vehicles, they're not usually Toyotas, and the Toyotas that end up in there, even though they're the minority, or not necessarily, because there's a lot of them out there, but the typical story he tells me is, yeah, you know, someone's retired and gone and picked up an old, you know, a 300,000. Just think about that, 300,000 Ks. It is a lot of Ks, guys. It's a lot of Ks. So you need to make sure, if you've got one that with that high Ks, or you're buying one, you need to make sure either the maintenance was done and it is up to date, was up to date, and it's always been serviced well. If you're going to go and buy a vehicle, I'm not suggesting you go and buy one with 300,000 Ks on it, unless you know the history. If you know this has been replaced, that's been replaced, these oils have been changed, you know the full history, then that's fine. But typically, if you buy a 300,000 or 400,000 K car, people are not going to have maintained it that well, and all the usual replacement items that come up at 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, they probably haven't been done. So you need to budget and replace these things. And what I'm trying to say is, there's no guarantee that everything's going to be okay. There's no guarantee that, you know, at 350,000 Ks, that turbo is not going to fail. The vehicle's done 350,000 Ks, okay? If you know the person did the oil every 5,000, if you know they let it idle for as long as necessary, depending on the conditions it was used in before they switched it off, and all these sorts of things, and all the prevention, you know, all the stuff we recommend throughout the videos has been done, there's probably a good chance you're not going to have any issues. Or it's very rare, you know, you're going to be the 1 in 1,000 or whatever it might be, okay? We've already mentioned in the other videos about the sort of recommended preventive maintenance items. But I just wanted to keep this one short and say, look, don't be in a false sense of security that you can just go and buy a 300,000 K 120 Prado for 10, 15 or 20 grand, whatever it is you paid it, whatever the case, what conditions and where you were and whatever, and think that it's going to be bulletproof and it's not going to cost you any money, okay? It's an old vehicle, it's awesome, they're good vehicles. You already know, I've got a nearly 400,000 K 120, we've got one of those ourselves. There's a lot of work being done, a lot of things been replaced, preventive maintenance. I'm always looking for what I can do next to replace it, okay? I don't know the history of how well it was really looked after before, you know, the 100, you know, just under 200,000 Ks. I know that it had all the regular 10,000 K services, but I've got a fair idea the injectors weren't done. The injectors weren't done, they probably hadn't been out. You know, had a standard filthy rotten EGR system, you know. I know that the turbo was replaced during that time. I know that it did a lot of towing, towed a caravan around Australia. No, it did a lot of hard work, you know, with just maybe standard maintenance. And then depending where it went, did that maintenance actually really happen? So that's what I'm saying. That's a pretty well looked, and it's been a lot better looked after since then, okay? So sort of making up for it. So don't get caught out. What I'm trying to say is don't get caught out thinking, oh yeah, you know, these cars, you know, and then when you've got a high 300 or 400,000 kilometre vehicle, you have a problem, you go, oh, what a heap of crap, this and that. Stop and have a think about it. Only 20, 30 years ago, right? 15, 20 years ago, whatever, you know, oh, 80, oh, 100,000 Ks, oh, it's getting a bit long in the tooth, I better move that on, or oh, 150, oh, 160, 180,000 Ks, oh, no, yeah, no, I better get rid of that before something major goes wrong. Now you're buying cars, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just don't think nothing's going to happen, especially if you haven't done the maintenance. Okay, when you buy a vehicle, when you go and buy one of these, if someone doesn't say, hey, I had the injectors replaced, you know, here's the receipt, this is where it was done, we got quality, definitely brand new, not the remanufactured, because, you know, whatever their reasons are, you know, that's what we recommend, only brand new. Beware of the Chinese copies, beware of, you know, you can have remanufactured if you like, but I hope you're saving a lot of money, because you kind of got someone else's old injectors, you know, with some parts changed, is the way it works. Unless something's changed, to my knowledge, that's how it works. You can't beat new, you just want new. And you know, they come in the same boxes, so that's the hard part for you to work out. That's why we're here. We can supply you the whole kit, or just injectors, or injectors box, whatever you want really. We've got other videos on it. This is not about that. It's just, please be careful. Don't become complacent, not displacement. It's not displacement, it's don't be complacent. Don't, you know what I mean? Just a bit of a wake-up call. Don't think that, oh, you know, it's done 300,000 Ks and everything will be okay, because it probably will be, but just understand what you're asking of the vehicle, right? That's a lot of Ks, okay? So the good part was, lately everybody's been replacing heaps of injectors in all the older ones, you know, all a few 05, 06 Hilux, but mainly your 07, 08, 09, 120 Prados and Hiluxes and that vintage, all the way up. There's been a lot all the way up to about 2010 and 11. Awesome, that's what we want. We want to get all these old ones out so that there's no old ones left to replace, unless it's replacing them a second time because they were done at 150,000 and it's hitting 300,000 or something like that, for example. So anyway, so there's a number of things you can do maintenance wise, and obviously all the general stuff, coolant changes, oil changes, filter changes is all your most important stuff. When you start it up, you don't need to let it idle for ages. You don't need to idle for ages before you switch it off. It all depends how it's been used. If you've been driving a slow environment and it's pretty cool, that's fine. If you come off the highway towing a caravan, it needs to idle for a couple of minutes, okay? Anyway guys, I wanted to keep this one short. Just wanted to let you know, a bit of a wake-up call, and just remember, you've done a lot of Ks, expect anything. If you haven't, make sure you replace these. Is probably the best advice I can give you, and get in that VIP group so that you're part of the community. And we've got a couple of systems in place that you can press like and say yes to, and that is worst case scenario, something happens, your engine blows up, you can put your hand up, or someone else, you can make that small donation to contribute to someone else. Hasn't happened yet, but we like to be prepared for things that may happen. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up if you got something out of that. Wake up call, and yeah, subscribe, turn the bell on. We got more information coming your way. Thanks guys, see ya.